Her stepmother stole her inheritance. Karma came faster than expected. The first handful of dirt hit the coffin with a sound that made Mara's chest tighten. Her fingers went numb on the edge of her black coat, and she stared at the polished wood as if her eyes could stop it from disappearing. A week ago, her father had been laughing at the kitchen table, teasing her about how she still burned toast. Now his name was on a stone. The sky was gray and low. The cemetery smelled like wet grass and cold earth. People stood in a quiet line, whispering soft words that didn't reach Mara's heart. She heard strong, girl, and so sorry, and he was a good man. But all she could think was, he was my only safe place. Beside her Celeste, her stepmother, did not cry. Her face stayed still, like she was watching a business deal close. She held a small black umbrella, even though the rain had stopped. Her lipstick was perfect. Her hair was smooth. Her eyes moved from person to person, measuring them, taking notes. Mara's throat hurt from holding back sobs. She was 22 with no mother to run to and no siblings who understood. Her father had been everything protector guy, the one person who always said, "You'll be okay, Mara. I've got you." When the short funeral service ended, the guests slowly drifted away. A few hugged Mara, and she hugged back stiffly as if her body belonged to someone else. She watched her father's best friend, Mr. Harlan, press a hand to her shoulder. "He loved you," he said gently. Mara nodded, unable to speak. Celeste stepped forward at the exact moment Mr. Harlan moved away, like she had been waiting for space. She leaned in and spoke close to Mara's ear, her voice low and neat. "We need to be practical now," she said. Mara blinked, confused. "Practical, yes," Celeste replied. "There are documents, arrangements, bank matters, and you'll need to listen carefully because this is not a time for emotional choices." Mara stared at her. The words felt wrong at a graveside. "My dad just died." Celeste's expression did not soften. "And because he died, the world doesn't pause. We go home. You'll do as I say." Understood. Mara's fingers tightened into her palm. She wanted to argue. She wanted to shout, "You're not my mother. You can't talk to me like that." But her voice was trapped behind grief. Her father was gone, and that fact pressed down on her like a heavy hand. On the drive back, Mara sat in the passenger seat looking out the window. The car smelled like Celeste's perfume, sharp and expensive. Celeste drove with both hands on the wheel, calm, controlled. The radio stayed off. "Your father and I spoke about the estate," Celeste said after a long silence. Mara's heart flickered. He did, yes," Celeste said. "He wanted everything to be handled cleanly. No fighting, no misunderstandings." Mara swallowed. "He told me he had a plan. He said the house was Celeste, cut her off eyes still on the road. The house is mine to manage now. The legal process is already in motion." Mara turned, a small panic rising. "What do you mean in motion? I haven't even seen anything." Celeste finally glanced at her quick and cold. "You don't need to see anything yet. The will is being read privately with the attorney." "That is normal." Privately, Mara's voice cracked. "Shouldn't I be there?" Celeste's smile was thin. "Mara, don't make this harder. You're young and you're upset. You'll misunderstand legal language. Let the adults handle it." The word adults hit like a slap. Mara stared ahead, her eyes stinging. Had her father really wanted her pushed aside like this? When they reached the house, Mara stepped into the hallway and froze. It was her home. She had grown up here. Every corner held a memory: her father cooking, humming badly, her father fixing a broken chair, her father sitting with her during storms when she was little. But now something felt different. The air was too quiet. The walls seemed too clean. And on the console table by the door, where her father always kept his keys and wallet, there was nothing. Celeste walked in behind her and removed her coat slowly. "Go to your room," she said. "I need to make calls." Mara's voice came out small. "Calls to who?" Celeste did not answer. She took out her phone and walked toward the study, her father's study, without hesitation, as if she owned it completely. Mara stood in the hallway trembling. She turned her head toward the study door and saw Celeste close it firmly. A minute later, Mara heard the click of a lock. She stared at the door. Her father never locked that room. Never. Her stomach dropped. Why would Celeste lock his study on the day of his funeral? Mara walked closer slowly like she was afraid the floor might break. She put her hand on the knob and tried it gently. Locked. A cold wave moved through her chest. She pressed her forehead to the door for a second, listening. She heard Celeste's voice inside, soft, polite, almost sweet, speaking to someone on the phone. "Yes, I understand," Celeste said. "I want it handled quickly, as discussed." Mara stepped back, her mouth dry. What exactly had been discussed? She returned to her room and sat on the edge of the bed without taking off her shoes. The curtains were half open, and the late afternoon light looked pale and tired. Her phone buzzed with messages from friends. She didn't answer. She opened the drawer of her bedside table and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a birthday card her father had given her last year. On the back, he had written in his messy handwriting, "Proud of you, always." Mara held it to her chest. Tears finally spilled, hot and quiet. Then her eyes landed on something else, a framed photo on her desk. It was her and her father on the porch, smiling sun in their faces. Behind them, the house looked warm and safe. But now in the hallway, someone else was locking doors. That evening, Celeste called Mara downstairs. Mara came slowly, her body heavy. Celeste sat at the dining table with a folder in front of her. A second folder sat beside it. Both were neat, labeled with printed stickers. Mara's heart raced. "What's that?" Celeste's voice stayed calm. "Basic paperwork. Your father's accounts, the household expenses, and what you need to know." Mara took a step closer. "Am I finally seeing the will?" Celeste tapped the folder lightly. "Not yet." Mara's hands shook. "Why not?" Celeste leaned back in her chair. "Because there is a process, Mara, and because your father left instructions. He wanted me to manage everything until certain conditions are met." Mara stared at her, confused and frightened. "What conditions?" Celeste's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Don't worry about it. You'll be provided for. But you will not question me every 5 minutes." Mara's voice rose before she could stop it. "Provided for how? I don't even have access to his study. I don't even know what's happening with the house or his money." "This was my home before you." Celeste slammed her palms softly on the table. Not loud, but sharp enough to stop Mara's breath. "Watch your tone," Celeste said, her smile gone now. "You are living under my roof, and you will not speak to me like I'm some stranger." Mara's eyes widened. "Your roof," Celeste held her gaze. "Yes, mine. That is how things are now." Mara felt the room tilt. Her knees weakened. She looked at the folders again, at the way Celeste had placed them like props in a performance. Celeste slid one folder toward Mara. "This is what you need to focus on. You will get a small monthly allowance, enough for basics. You will not touch your father's accounts. You will not contact his attorney without me, and you will not enter the study." Mara's voice came out as a whisper. Why Celeste's face stayed smooth, but her eyes were hard. "Because I said so." Mara's chest tightened until it hurt. She thought of her father's voice. "You'll be okay, Mara. I've got you." But he was gone. And in the quiet after Celeste's words, Mara noticed something on the table that made her blood run cold. At the edge of the folder, half covered, was a sheet of paper with a heading she recognized from her father's files. "Revised estate distribution." Mara stared at that one word, revised, until her vision blurred. Why would anything need to be revised after he died? The next morning, Mara woke up to an unfamiliar sound, her phone vibrating again and again. For one hopeful second, her heart jumped, as if it could be her father calling to say this was all a mistake. But it was her bank app. "Alert. Your account access has changed. Please contact your administrator." Mara sat up, fast, cold fear rushing through her. She opened the app again. a spinning circle, then a message she had never seen before. Account restricted. Her father had added her months ago just in case he had said. He told her she would never have to beg anyone. Now overnight she was locked out like she had never existed. She threw on a hoodie and walked downstairs. Celeste was already in the kitchen, calm as always. She stood by the coffee machine, tapping on her phone with perfect nails, as if her world had not cracked in two. Celeste, Mara said, trying to keep her voice steady. My bank access is restricted. Celeste didn't look up. Mm. What? Mara stepped closer. Did you do something? Celeste finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were cool. I handled what needed to be handled. That's my account, Mara said. Her throat tightened. My name is on it. Celeste took a slow sip of coffee. Your father's accounts were complicated. For your own protection, I'm consolidating things. It's temporary. It doesn't feel temporary, Mara whispered. Celeste's lips pressed together. Mara, grief makes you dramatic. Sit down, eat something. Mara didn't sit. I need to call the attorney. Celeste's expression sharpened. No, you don't. Why? Mara asked. Why can't I talk to him? He was my father. Celeste set her cup down with a quiet click. Because you will confuse him with your emotions. Because you don't understand legal details. And because your father trusted me to manage this. Mara stared at her, trying to read her face. Did he say I wasn't allowed to talk to the attorney? Celeste's eyes held Mara's for a long second. He wanted peace. He wanted no conflict. If you start calling people, you'll create conflict. Mara's hands curled into fists. So your solution is to cut me off from everything. Celeste's voice stayed smooth. My solution is to keep you from making mistakes. You'll get your allowance. That should be enough. Allowance. Like Mara was a child. Like her whole life was now a small favor. Mara swallowed the lump in her throat and forced herself to move. She went back upstairs, opened her laptop, and searched for the attorney's email. She had seen it before on letters in her father's study. But she couldn't go into the study. She tried to remember the name. It slipped away, buried under grief and panic. She walked to the study door again and tested the knob. Locked. She knocked softly. Celeste. I need one letter. Just one. No answer. She knocked harder. Please. The door stayed silent, like it was no longer part of the house. Mara leaned against the wall, breathing fast. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Celeste coming down the hallway with a folded stack of papers in her hand. What are you doing? Celeste asked, her voice flat. I need my dad's attorney contact, Mara said. I'm not trying to fight. I just need to know what's happening. Celeste raised one eyebrow. And you thought breaking into the study was the way? I wasn't breaking in. Mara snapped, then instantly regretted it. Celeste's smile didn't reach her eyes. You're unstable right now. You don't even hear yourself. Mara felt her cheeks burn. I'm not unstable. I'm scared. Celeste stepped closer, lowering her voice as if she was doing Mara a kindness. Listen to me. I know you think you're being strong, but you're not thinking clearly. Your father's death was sudden. It shocked everyone. He left responsibilities behind. I'm carrying them. Mara's eyes watered. Then why do you treat me like I'm your enemy? Celeste sighed, dramatic and practiced. I don't. You treat me like an enemy. I've tried to be patient. I've tried to keep the house running. Mara looked around. The house was running, yes, but it was running without her, like she was a guest in her own life. That week, the shift became impossible to ignore. The first change was small, but it cut deep. Mara went to the pantry one afternoon and saw that the snacks her father always bought her, favorite crackers, the little chocolates he used to hide in the back, were gone, replaced with plain, food-cheap brands, things that said budget without saying it. She told herself it didn't matter. Food was food. But then the next change came. When Mara asked Celeste for money to refill her medication, something her father always handled without question, Celeste stared at her as if she had asked for a luxury handbag. How much is it? Celeste asked. 80, Mara said quietly. Celeste clicked her tongue. 80 for pills. That's excessive. It's not optional, Mara said. The doctor. Celeste waved her hand. Fine, I'll transfer it. But you need to learn to be more careful. You can't just spend. Mara stood there stunned. Spend? She wasn't spending on clothes. She wasn't spending on fun. She was spending on being able to breathe without panic at night. Later, Mara checked her phone. A transfer came through, $40. She stared at the screen until it blurred. She went downstairs and held up her phone. It's not enough, Mara said. Celeste didn't look away from the TV. Then asked the pharmacy if they have a cheaper option. Mara's voice shook. That's not how it works. Celeste finally looked at her. Do you know what else doesn't work? Acting like money grows on trees. We have expenses now. We have legal fees. Mara swallowed. Legal fees for what Celeste's gaze was sharp. For selling the estate. Don't question everything. You'll make yourself sick. Mara felt like she was drowning in rules she didn't agree to. She started writing things down in a notebook. Dates, conversations, strange changes, because something inside her kept whispering, this is not normal. At night, she heard Celeste on the phone again and again, always in the study, always behind the locked door. Sometimes Celeste laughed softly, a sound that didn't belong in a house that was still mourning. Mara tried calling her father's best friend Mr. Harlan, but Celeste somehow found out within hours. That evening, Celeste cornered her in the kitchen. Did you speak to Harlan? Celeste asked. Mara froze. How did you? Celeste's eyes narrowed. Answer me. Yes, Mara admitted. I just asked if he knew the attorney's name. Celeste's mouth tightened. You're going behind my back. I'm trying to understand, Mara said. Her hands trembled. I'm his daughter. Why am I being treated like a problem? Celeste leaned in, her voice low. Because you don't know your place yet. Mara's stomach turned. My place. Celeste straightened, smoothing her sleeve as if she had just fixed something messy. Your father married me. That made me his legal spouse. Do you know what that means? Mara stared, breath caught. It means, Celeste continued, that I have authority. Over the house. Over the accounts. Over the process. Mara whispered, not over my life. Celeste's smile returned slow and cold. If you want comfort, keep your head down. If you want to fight, you'll lose. That night, Mara sat on her bed staring at the ceiling. Her chest felt tight, not only from grief, but from something darker, powerlessness. She went to her closet to grab a sweater and noticed something that made her stand still. A small lockbox, the one her father had kept on the top shelf, was missing. It wasn't big, it wasn't flashy, but Mara remembered it clearly because her father once opened it in front of her just for a second, and she saw what was inside. Her birth certificate, her mother's old necklace, and an envelope marked in his handwriting for Mara. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She climbed onto a chair, reached to the back of the shelf, checked every corner, every box, every folded blanket. Nothing. Mara jumped down, breathing fast, and ran to the hallway closet where her father stored important papers sometimes. She searched. Nothing. She ran to the linen cabinet. Nothing. Her hands shook as she stood in the middle of her room, looking at the empty space where the lockbox had been. She forced herself to walk downstairs. Celeste was in the living room, legs crossed, scrolling calmly on her phone. Where is it? Mara asked, voice thin. Celeste didn't look up. Where is what? My father's lockbox, Mara said louder now. The one he kept in my closet. It's gone. Celeste paused, then slowly lifted her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Mara's whole body trembled. Yes, you do. It was there. It had my documents. It had something he left for me. Celeste tilted her head like Mara was a child telling a silly story. Mara, you're confused. You're grieving. You probably moved it and forgot. Mara felt something snap inside her, quiet, sharp, and clear. No, Mara said, voice shaking but firm. I didn't move it. Celeste stared at her for a moment, then smiled faintly as if she enjoyed this. Then prove it, Celeste said softly. Or stop accusing me. Mara's throat burned. She realized with a sick certainty that the lockbox wasn't lost. It was taken. And whatever was inside it, whatever her father wanted her to have, Celeste had it now. Celeste sat alone in the study long after the house went quiet. The door was locked, the curtains drawn. The warm desk lamp cast a soft glow over the polished wood, making the room feel expensive and private, exactly how she liked it. She opened a folder and slid the contents out slowly, arranging them with care. She hated disorder. On the desk lay the revised will, several bank statements, and the small metal lockbox Mara had been searching for. Celeste rested her fingers on it, tapping once thoughtfully. This should have been simpler, she murmured to herself. She had not planned to marry a man with a child. When she met Mara's father, Richard, she saw stability, comfort, and a life she could finally control. He was kind, predictable, and generous in ways that made her feel safe. But his daughter was always there, watching, existing, reminding Celeste that none of this was truly hers. Mara was polite, quiet, too soft, and that made Celeste uneasy. Soft people attracted sympathy. Soft people became problems. Celeste leaned back in the chair and remembered the first time she asked Richard about his will. It was casual, over dinner. She had laughed lightly and said, "You should really organize these things." What if something happened? Richard had smiled and said, "Mara is taken care of." Always. That sentence stayed with her, took root, grew sharp edges. Always. It meant Celeste would always be second, temporary, replaceable. She had spent years building a perfect image, charity events, polite smiles, warm greetings to neighbors. Everyone said how lucky Mara was to have such a supportive stepmother. Celeste made sure they saw her holding Mara's arm in public, praising her in front of others. But behind closed doors, she watched. She waited. When Richard's health began to fail suddenly, Celeste moved quickly. She called the family attorney herself. She scheduled private meetings. She framed everything as concern. "My husband worries about his daughter," she told the lawyer. "She's emotional. She struggles with anxiety. He wants to make sure she doesn't make impulsive decisions." The lawyer listened. He nodded. Celeste learned then how powerful words could be when spoken calmly. Now in the study, she opened the lockbox. Inside were the items Mara remembered: the birth certificate, the necklace, the envelope. Celeste picked up the envelope last. She didn't open it right away. She stared at the handwriting, Richard's handwriting, and felt a flicker of irritation. He always wrote notes to Mara. Little messages, encouragements, promises. Celeste slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single page. "Mara, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to explain things properly. I need you to know something very clearly. The house is yours. I placed it in a trust under your name years ago. Celeste is allowed to live there only while she respects that. The accounts marked in blue are for your education and independence. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." Celeste's jaw tightened. So he had planned ahead, more than she expected. She exhaled slowly, then folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. "No," she said quietly. "That won't work." She stood and walked to the filing cabinet, pulling out copies of legal documents she had already arranged. Addendums, amendments, carefully worded revisions that shifted authority temporarily to the surviving spouse for management purposes. She had practiced the explanation. It was all about protection, about stability, about preventing emotional harm. The next morning, Celeste dressed carefully and went to see the attorney again. She arrived with red-rimmed eyes and a tremble in her voice. "I'm worried about Mara," she said, sitting across from him. "She's accusing me of things. She's unstable. I found her searching through locked areas of the house." The attorney frowned slightly. "That's concerning." She's grieving, Celeste continued gently, and she's young. Richard always worried she might make rash decisions. He asked me to manage things until she matures. She placed the revised documents on the desk. The attorney read them carefully. These changes are significant. Celeste nodded. Richard insisted. He didn't want conflict. He wanted peace in the family. She let silence do the rest. Outside that office, Celeste's phone buzzed with messages from relatives offering condolences. She replied warmly, thanked them, told them Mara was having a hard time. By the time Celeste returned home, she was already winning the story. That afternoon, Mara confronted her again. I want my documents, Mara said, standing in the doorway of the living room. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. My birth certificate, my father's letter. I know you took them. Celeste sighed long and tired. This obsession isn't healthy. It's not an obsession, Mara said. It's my life. Celeste stood slowly. Do you want to know the truth? Mara nodded. Celeste met her gaze. The truth is, your father trusted me more than he trusted your emotional judgment. He asked me to handle things. Mara's face went pale. He would never. You don't know everything, Celeste said sharply. You weren't there for the late-night conversations. You didn't see how worried he was. Mara's hands trembled. You're lying. Celeste stepped closer. Careful. That night, Celeste made her move. She transferred the house's utilities fully into her name. She redirected mail. She scheduled an appraisal without telling Mara. She contacted a financial institution to consolidate accounts using her authority as executor. Then she locked the lockbox in her personal safe. As she closed the safe door, she smiled faintly. Mara was alone. No access, no proof, no power, or so Celeste believed. Because the next morning, as Celeste reviewed paperwork in the study, her phone buzzed with a message that made her fingers still. Unknown number, I think you should know. Richard changed the trust years ago. I witnessed it, and I kept a copy. Celeste's breath caught. For the first time since the funeral, fear slipped past her careful control. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Someone else knew. And if Mara found out, everything Celeste had built could collapse. She locked the study door again, tighter this time. But control, once shaken, never fully returns. Mara read the message 3 times before her hands started to shake. She was sitting on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, phone glowing in the dim light of her room. The house was quiet, but her heart was loud, pounding so hard it hurt. Someone else knew. Someone had witnessed the trust change. Her first instinct was fear. What if it was a trap? What if Celeste had sent it to scare her? But the message didn't sound like Celeste. There was no threat, no control, just information. Mara typed slowly, "Who is this?" The reply came a minute later. "My name is Thomas Reed. I worked with your father's financial advisor. He asked me to be present when the trust was updated. He said it was important someone independent remembered." Mara covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness this time, but from something fragile and unfamiliar. Hope. She stood up and locked her bedroom door, even though she had never done that before. Then she typed again. "Celeste says my father gave her full control." A pause. "Then that is not true." Mara's legs felt weak. She sat back down. "Can you prove it?" she asked. "Yes," Thomas replied. "But you need to be careful. Your stepmother is moving fast." Careful. Mara had been careful all her life. Quiet, polite, patient. And look where it had brought her. She heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly slid her phone under her pillow. A knock came at the door. Mara Celeste's voice called, "Dinner." "I'm not hungry," Mara said. Silence. Then Celeste tried the handle. "Locked," Mara Celeste said again, sharper now. "Open the door. I need some space." Mara replied, her voice steady, despite the fear in her chest. Another pause. Celeste exhaled slowly. "We'll talk later." The footsteps moved away. Mara waited a full minute before pulling her phone back out. "What do I do?" she typed. Thomas's reply was firm. "You start collecting everything. Dates, messages, restrictions. And you do not confront her alone again." Mara stared at the words, "Do not confront her alone." It felt strange to be told that, like she was finally being taken seriously. The next day, Mara began quietly resisting. She didn't shout. She didn't accuse. She observed. She wrote down every time Celeste mentioned temporary control, every time money was withheld, every time Celeste spoke to someone on the phone and then changed her story afterward. When Celeste told relatives that Mara was unstable, Mara noted the date and the names. When Celeste refused to give her the attorney's contact information again, Mara recorded it. And when Celeste announced that Mara would need to start contributing to household expenses with money Mara couldn't access, Mara wrote that down too. That evening, Mara met Thomas Reed for the first time. They met at a small cafe across town. Mara chose it because Celeste never went there. It smelled like coffee and old books, and the noise made Mara feel less exposed. Thomas was in his late 40s with tired eyes and kind hands. He didn't smile much, but when he spoke, his voice was calm. "Your father was very clear," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "He wanted you protected from exactly this situation." Mara's hands hovered over the folder. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Thomas sighed. "Because Celeste positioned herself early. She controlled access, and people assumed she was acting in good faith." Mara opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents, trust records, dates, signatures, her father's signature, her name, the house. Her breath caught. She said the house was hers. Thomas shook his head. "She can live there, but she cannot own it, not legally." Mara felt something shift inside her. Not relief, something stronger. Ground. "Why would she lie?" Mara asked quietly. Thomas looked at her. "Because once you know this, her control ends." Mara nodded slowly. "She has the original letter my father wrote me." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Then she took it unlawfully." Mara swallowed. "She keeps saying I'm emotional, that I can't handle this." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "Grief does not make you incapable. It makes you human." That sentence stayed with Mara. When she returned home, Celeste was waiting in the living room. "Where were you?" Celeste asked. "Out," Mara replied. Celeste's eyes sharpened. With who? Mara paused. For the first time, she didn't rush to explain. "Someone who knew my father," Mara said. Celeste's lips tightened. "You're being secretive." Mara met her gaze. "So are you." The air between them went cold. Celeste smiled thinly. "Be careful, Mara. You're starting to look ungrateful." Mara's heart raced, but she didn't back down. "I just want the truth." Celeste stepped closer. "The truth is what I say it is." That night, Mara sat on her bed and looked at the copies Thomas had given her. She took photos, backed them up, emailed them to herself. She hid the originals under a loose floorboard she remembered from childhood. Her father had shown her once smiling, just in case. The next morning, Celeste made her decisive move. Mara found a notice taped to her bedroom door. "Notice of intent to vacate. Please arrange alternative housing within 30 days." Mara stared at it, her hands shaking. She walked downstairs, the paper crumpled in her fist. "You're kicking me out?" Mara asked. Celeste didn't look surprised. "I'm encouraging independence." "This is my home," Mara said. Celeste lifted her chin. "Not anymore." Mara felt fear rise, but it didn't drown her this time. She took a breath. "Then I'll fight," Mara said quietly. Celeste laughed short and sharp. With what money, what lawyer? Mara met her eyes. With the truth. For a split second, Celeste's smile faltered. Just a split second. Mara turned and walked back upstairs. She packed a small bag, not to leave, but to be ready. That evening, she sent one final message to Thomas. "I'm ready." The choice had been made. And from that moment on, Mara stopped being a victim and became a threat. Mara moved out 3 days later, not because she was defeated, but because staying had become dangerous. Celeste watched from the doorway as Mara zipped her small suitcase. Her face showed no anger, no regret, only satisfaction. "This is for the best," Celeste said. "You'll learn how the real world works." Mara didn't answer. She walked past her stepmother without lowering her eyes. The first night in the small rented room felt strange. The walls were thin. The bed creaked. But for the first time since her father's death, Mara slept without fear of footsteps outside her door. The next morning, the fight truly began. Thomas introduced Mara to a lawyer named Evelyn Carter. She was calm, sharp, and didn't interrupt when Mara spoke. She listened as Mara explained everything: the locked study, the missing lockbox, the restricted accounts, the eviction notice. Evelyn took notes. Then she looked up. "She overreached," Evelyn said. "And that's good for you," Mara frowned. "How people who lie carefully stay hidden," Evelyn replied. "People who get greedy make mistakes." They began slowly, not loudly, not publicly, carefully. Evelyn filed formal requests for financial transparency. She requested copies of the will. She demanded justification for restricted access to accounts bearing Mara's name. Celeste responded the way she always did: politely, confidently, and with delays. Meanwhile, Mara rebuilt herself piece by piece. She found a part-time job at a bookstore. The pay was small, but the work gave her structure. She started seeing her therapist again, paying what she could. One evening while shelving books, Mara caught her reflection in a mirror. Her shoulders were straighter. Her eyes were clearer. She was still scared, but she was no longer lost. Weeks passed. Then the first crack appeared. Celeste's lawyer requested a private settlement meeting. "She's nervous," Evelyn said. "She wants control back." Mara swallowed. "What do I do?" Evelyn met her gaze. "You stay honest. That's your power." At the meeting, Celeste arrived dressed perfectly. Her smile was warm. Anyone watching would think she was the victim. "Mara," Celeste said gently, "I never wanted this to turn ugly." Mara didn't respond. Celeste turned to Evelyn. "This is a family misunderstanding. We can resolve it quietly." Evelyn slid a document across the table. "Then explain this." It was a bank record. A transfer Celeste had authorized, moving funds marked for Mara's education into a personal investment account. Celeste's smile twitched. "That was temporary," she said quickly. "For protection?" Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "Protection from whom?" Silence. Outside the room, rumors started to spread. Relatives whispered. Neighbors noticed the house had been appraised. Charity friends asked questions Celeste couldn't answer easily. At night, Celeste stopped sleeping well. She checked her phone constantly. She reread emails looking for threats that weren't there. One afternoon, she confronted Mara outside the courthouse. "You're enjoying this?" Celeste hissed, watching me scramble. Mara's hand shook, but her voice didn't. "No, I'm just telling the truth." Celeste's eyes were wild. "You think this makes you strong?" Mara met her gaze. "It already has." That night, as Mara sat alone in her room, she thought about her father's letter, about the care he took to protect her, about how close she had come to losing everything, not just money, but her sense of worth. She whispered into the quiet room, "I won't disappear." And somewhere across town, Celeste felt something she had never planned for. Control slipping. For the first time, she realized she might lose more than money. She might lose everything. The courtroom was quiet in a way that felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Mara sat at the table beside Evelyn, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart beat fast, but her mind was clear. She wore a simple jacket and had pulled her hair back. She wanted to look like herself, not like someone playing a role. Across the room, Celeste sat with her lawyer. She looked composed, almost bored. Her posture was perfect. Her face showed confidence, as if this was just another meeting she would walk away from untouched. The judge entered. Everyone stood, and then it began. Evelyn spoke first. Her voice was calm, firm, and steady. She laid out the timeline: the death, the sudden restriction of accounts, the locked study, the missing lockbox, the eviction notice. Celeste's lawyer objected often, but the judge listened. Then Evelyn placed the copies of the trust documents on the table. These were executed 3 years prior to Mr. Richard Hale's death, Evelyn said. They clearly state that the residential property and designated accounts belong to Mara Hale, held in trust. The defendant had permission to manage, not to seize. Celeste shifted in her seat. Her lawyer stood. My client acted in good faith. She believed she was protecting a grieving young woman from financial harm. Evelyn nodded once. Then we welcome transparency. She turned to the judge. We request a full forensic audit of all accounts touched by the defendant after Mr. Hale's death. The judge looked over his glasses. Granted. Celeste's face lost a shade of color. The next witness was Thomas Reed. He walked to the stand and took an oath. His voice did not shake. I was present when Mr. Hale amended the trust, he said. He was clear. He feared that his wife would override his daughter's rights. He asked me to remember in case something happened. Celeste's lawyer objected again, but the judge waved it off. Mara felt tears burn her eyes. Her father had known. He had seen this coming. Then came the lockbox. Evelyn presented photos, serial numbers, a written statement from a locksmith who confirmed that Celeste had installed a personal safe 2 days after the funeral. The judge looked directly at Celeste. Did you take possession of personal documents belonging to the plaintiff? Celeste's mouth opened, then closed. Yes, she said tightly. For safekeeping. For whose benefit, the judge asked. Celeste didn't answer. The courtroom murmured. The audit results arrived faster than anyone expected. Transfers, redirections, unauthorized investments. Money that had been labeled clearly for Mara moved spent or locked away. Celeste's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Celeste shook her head, her jaw clenched. Evelyn stood again. This is not protection, she said. This is theft. Celeste finally stood. I did what I had to do. She snapped, her voice sharp and breaking. She would have wasted it. She's weak. She doesn't know how the world works. The judge's expression hardened. Sit down. Celeste remained standing, breathing hard. The perfect image cracked in front of everyone. She would have lost everything, Celeste said, her voice rising. I deserve security. I deserve control. The judge's gavel struck the bench. That is enough. The ruling came swiftly. Celeste was removed as executor, all authority revoked. She was ordered to return the lockbox and its contents immediately. The accounts were frozen pending restoration to Mara, and then came the final blow. Due to documented misuse of funds and intentional misrepresentation, the court referred the case for criminal review. Celeste sank back into her chair. Her face went pale. Her hands trembled. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Not many, but enough. Celeste tried to walk past them with her head high. Mrs. Hale, is it true you altered estate documents? Did you take money meant for your stepdaughter? Are criminal charges coming? Celeste said nothing. She got into her car and drove away alone. That night, her phone buzzed with messages she didn't answer. Invitations canceled. Charity boards requested her resignation. Friends went silent. The house was no longer hers to enter. Mara stood on the courthouse steps, sunlight warm on her face. Evelyn handed her a folder. It's over, Evelyn said softly. Mara let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. Across town, Celeste sat in a dark apartment she had rented in a hurry. Boxes half unpacked, her expensive clothes still in garment bags. She stared at the wall, her reflection in the dark window, unfamiliar. She had lost the house, the money, the image. Everything she tried to steal had taken something back. And this time there was no one left to blame but herself. The house smelled different when Mara walked back in. Not because the walls had changed or the floors had been cleaned, but because the weight was gone. The air felt lighter, like a storm had passed and taken something ugly with it. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, keys resting in her palm. These were her keys now. No permission needed, no fear attached. She stepped inside slowly. The furniture was the same. The light through the windows fell just as it always had. But for the first time since her father's death, the house felt like a home again, not a battlefield. The lockbox sat on the dining table. Evelyn had arranged for its return the same day as the ruling. No delays, no excuses. Mara sat down and opened it with careful hands. Inside was everything she remembered: her birth certificate, her mother's necklace, and the envelope. She took the letter out last. Her fingers trembled as she opened it and read the words again, slowly letting them sink in, without panic this time. The house is yours. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Mara pressed the letter to her chest and cried, not from pain, but from release. In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically become perfect. There were appointments, paperwork, meetings with financial advisors, long days where Mara felt exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. But it was honest exhaustion, clean exhaustion. The money was restored carefully. The accounts were returned to her name. The trust stood firm. Mara chose not to rush. She paid off small debts first. She repaired what Celeste had neglected. She kept the house simple. Some relatives reached out again, quieter now. "I'm sorry if you said. We didn't know." Mara nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She learned that silence chosen freely could be stronger than shouting. One afternoon, she found herself in her father's study. The door stood open. Sunlight spilled across the desk. Dust floated in the air. Everything was exactly where he had left it. She sat in his chair and let herself remember not the fight, but the calm moments. His laugh, his patience, the way he always believed she would be okay, even when she didn't. "I am okay," she whispered. Across town, Celeste's world looked very different. Her name had quietly disappeared from boards and invitation lists. The friends who once praised her strength now avoided eye contact. The criminal investigation moved forward, slowly but steadily. She sold jewelry to cover legal fees. She moved again to something smaller. For the first time, no one asked her opinion. No one needed her approval. The control she had built her identity around was gone, and without it, there was nothing left to hide behind. Mara didn't celebrate Celeste's fall. She didn't stalk the news or wait for updates. She focused forward. She enrolled in classes she had once postponed. She planted flowers in the garden her father loved. She invited a few close friends over for quiet dinners. Laughter returned to the house, soft at first, then real. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Mara stood on the porch holding a cup of tea. The air was warm. The world felt steady. She had lost her father, but she had not lost herself. And that, she realized, was the part no one could ever steal. A year later, the house looked lived in again. Not staged, not controlled, just real. Mara sat at the kitchen table early in the morning, sunlight stretching across the wood. A stack of notebooks lay beside her laptop. She was studying now, slowly, on her own terms. Outside, the garden was fuller than it had ever been. The flowers her father once planted had come back stronger after being neglected for so long. She still missed him. That pain never disappeared completely, but it no longer ruled her. On the wall near the stairs hung a simple frame. Inside was her father's letter, not hidden, not locked away, open where it could be seen. Sometimes Mara caught herself smiling at it. She had learned how to manage her finances, how to ask questions without fear, how to stand her ground without becoming hard. The house no longer felt like something she could lose overnight. It was hers. She heard a knock at the door and opened it to see a friend holding coffee, laughing about something small and ordinary. Mara stepped aside and let her in. Life had moved forward, not perfectly, but honestly, and that was enough. Greed often wears a calm face. It speaks softly, uses legal words, and pretends to act for your own good. But truth does not need manipulation to survive. Lies can control for a while, but they always leave fingerprints behind. When someone builds power by taking from the weak, that power collapses the moment light reaches it. Karma does not always wait years to arrive. Sometimes it comes quickly, clearly, and without mercy. And when it does, it takes back more than money. It takes dignity, trust, and control. The truth, even when quiet, always wins in the end. If this story moved you, please like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional, true-to-life stories about family justice and karma. Leave a comment below and tell us what you would have done in Mara's place. Your support helps us keep these stories alive.